On a cold winter night in 1946, Billie Holiday gave birth in a secret hospital in Harlem, and this event would become one of music history's greatest secrets. Lady Day was only 31 years old, but at the peak of her career, and no one had noticed her pregnancy. Because this baby's father was one of the era's most famous white musicians, and this scandal could have ended both of their careers. Billie left her baby at St. Mary Monastery in the Bronx 3 days after birth and never shared this secret with anyone until her death. 78 years later, DNA tests conducted in 2024 gave shocking results. Lady Day's lost child may still be alive and probably doesn't know their true identity. So who is this secret child, and why did Billie Holiday take this secret to her grave? If you want to discover all the shocking details of this story, please subscribe and turn on notifications, because Billie Holiday's secret child story will reveal one of the music world's biggest mysteries. In late summer 1945, Billie Holiday was experiencing the brightest period of her career. She had shaken America with Strange Fruit and become one of jazz music's most important figures. However, during that time, a much more personal and dangerous development was happening in Lady Day's life: a secret relationship and the resulting pregnancy. This pregnancy wasn't just a personal situation. In 1940s America, where racial segregation was at its peak, it carried scandal potential that could threaten Billie's career and even her life. Those who carefully watched Billie Holiday's performances during this period could notice small changes in Lady Day's stage outfits. Billie, who previously preferred form-fitting dresses, began choosing looser and flowing designs. She also moved less on stage and performed in a more static manner. These changes were interpreted by critics as artistic maturity, but the real reason was much deeper. Billie Holiday had secretly become pregnant and didn't want anyone to notice this condition. The most critical point was who had caused the pregnancy. In the final months of 1945, Billie Holiday was in a secret relationship with one of the era's most famous white musicians. This musician was a recognized name throughout America, with both a solo career and big band experience. However, due to the social conditions of that era, romantic relationships between white and black artists could create not only scandal, but also physical danger. For this reason, both artists had to maintain their relationship in absolute secrecy. The discovery of the pregnancy was shocking for Billie because she hadn't yet fully discussed this matter with her partner. When Billie's personal doctor, Dr. James Morrison, confirmed the pregnancy, he presented Lady Day with two options: terminate the pregnancy or continue it secretly and give the baby up for adoption. At that time, abortion was both legally and medically a very risky procedure, and Billie chose to continue the pregnancy secretly instead. However, this decision would make her life very complicated for 9 months. From fall 1945 to winter 1946, Billie Holiday and a very small inner circle implemented an elaborate plan to hide the pregnancy. The most important part of this plan was to minimize Billie's public appearances and carefully schedule her stage performances. Lady Day's manager, Joe Glaser, was unaware of this situation because Billie hadn't told him anything about the pregnancy. Instead, they canceled some concerts with excuses of fatigue and vocal problems. The biggest role in hiding the pregnancy belonged to Billie's closest friend, Carmen McRae. Carmen took on the role of Billie's costume assistant and designed Lady Day's stage outfits to hide her pregnancy. Through special corsets, strategically placed accessories, and loose cuts, Billie Holiday's pregnancy went unnoticed until the 6th month. Carmen also organized Billie's public transportation needs, secretly taking her to and from doctor appointments. The most difficult period was the 7th and 8th months of pregnancy, because it had become almost impossible to hide Billie's physical changes. During this period, Lady Day performed only at very limited, carefully selected venues due to health problems. Additionally, Billie avoided cameramen and photographers as much as possible and had minimal contact with press members. This behavioral change was interpreted by the media as artistic temperament, but the real reason was much more practical. During the final months of pregnancy, Billie Holiday almost completely withdrew from public life. In January 1946, it was announced that Lady Day would take a 2-month break due to severe bronchitis. During this time, Billie stayed at a secret safe house in Harlem and prepared for birth. Carmen McRae never left Billie's side during this period, meeting her every need and providing moral support. On a cold February 1946 night, Billie Holiday's contractions began, and Carmen McRae immediately took her to a secret hospital in Harlem. This hospital was an institution under the direction of Dr. Charles Drew, primarily serving Black patients and known for its discretion. Dr. Drew was chosen for both his medical abilities and sensitivity regarding confidentiality. The hospital staff had promised they would never question the identity of the baby's parents. The birth process lasted approximately 14 hours, and Billie Holiday gave birth to a baby boy. The baby was healthy, but when Lady Day held him in her arms, she felt both happiness and deep sorrow, because she knew this baby couldn't stay with her. The social conditions of that era and Billie's career situation didn't allow her to raise a child as a single mother. Additionally, the baby's father absolutely didn't want this situation to become public knowledge. The most emotional moments were the 3 days Billie spent with her baby. During this time, Lady Day fed her baby, sang lullabies, and talked to him. Carmen McRae was the only person to witness these moments and would later say these 3 days were both the most beautiful and most painful days for Billie. Billie named her baby Louis. This name was both a tribute to Louis Armstrong and chosen for its meaning of freedom. At the end of the 3rd day, the arranged plan went into action. Billie Holiday would leave her baby at St. Mary of the Angels Monastery in the Bronx. This monastery was an institution known for its discretion, where unmarried mothers gave up their babies for adoption during that era. The nuns would ask no questions and would only facilitate the baby's adoption process. On a cold February 1946 morning, Billie Holiday held her baby for the last time and set out for the Bronx. In a discreet vehicle driven by Carmen McRae, they went to St. Mary of the Angels Monastery. Throughout the journey, Billie never spoke, just looked at her baby and caressed him. Carmen would later describe this journey as the most heartbreaking moment I've ever witnessed in my life. When they arrived at the monastery, Mother Superior Catherine greeted them. Catherine was very experienced in dealing with such situations and showed both understanding and practical approach toward Billie. When Billie handed over the baby, she used the name Eleanor F. This name came from her real name, Eleonora Fagan. On the adoption papers, the baby's mother was listed simply as Eleanor F., musician. The father's name section was deliberately left blank. The heaviest moment was when Billie kissed her baby for the last time and handed him over to Mother Catherine. Lady Day was using all her strength not to collapse at that moment, trying not to cry. Her last words to her baby were, "I will always love you, and someday, maybe you'll understand." Only Carmen heard these words and would later remember this moment as the moment Billie's heart broke. Mother Catherine gave assurance that the baby would be placed with a good Catholic family, but identity information would never be shared. This was the standard procedure of that era. Adoption secrecy was meant to protect both birth mothers and adoptive families. Billie accepted this guarantee, but secretly carried the hope that someday, somehow, she could find her baby. The number of people who knew about Billie Holiday's secret child was extremely small, and elaborate security measures were taken to keep it that way. Carmen McRae, who was in the innermost circle, protected this secret throughout her lifetime and only gave very limited hints under very specific circumstances. Carmen's role wasn't just practical support, but also providing emotional support. Carmen's support was critical for Lady Day to overcome this tragic experience. Charles Drew and the hospital staff never shared this information with anyone due to professional ethics. Dr. Drew also helped Billie with post-delivery care and ensured Lady Day's physical recovery. Additionally, Dr. Drew informed Billie about potential future health issues and recommended annual checkups. This medical relationship discreetly continued for years. Mother Catherine and the nuns at St. Mary Monastery maintained absolute secrecy due to religious vows. The monastery's adoption records were kept extremely secure, and only authorized personnel had access. The confidentiality of these records was so strict that even decades later, researchers had difficulty accessing this information. Most surprising was that even the baby's biological father didn't know the full details of this situation. Billie Holiday had informed this famous white musician about the pregnancy, but she deliberately kept the birth and adoption process secret. This decision was based on both protection and practical reasons, because the father's involvement would dramatically increase the scandal risk. When Billie Holiday returned to the stage in spring 1946, after her bronchitis treatment, fans and critics immediately noticed a deeper emotional layer in Lady Day's musical interpretation. There was new vulnerability in Billie's voice, and the pain in her songs felt more authentic. This change was interpreted by critics as artistic maturation, but the real source was much more personal. Significant changes also occurred in Billie's repertoire selection. She began performing songs with motherhood and loss themes more frequently. Melancholic pieces like My Man, Strange Fruit, and especially Gloomy Sunday gained new dimensions in Billie's interpretation. The audience perceived this emotional depth as Billie's artistic genius, but for Lady Day, these songs had become the musical expression of personal pain. The most touching moments were occasions when Billie performed lullaby-style songs. Gentle melodies like Summertime and Blue Moon acquired an almost maternal quality in Lady Day's voice. Studio recordings from this period reveal that Billie's vocal technique had become more nuanced, as if she was infusing every note with the memory of lost motherhood. Carmen McRae later revealed that Billie often hummed in private moments as if singing lullabies to her baby. This behavior became more pronounced, especially around birthdates. According to Carmen, Billie never completely overcame this loss, and somewhere in every song, the memory of that missing child echoed. Every year in February, subtle changes would occur in Billie Holiday's behavior pattern. Lady Day would become more withdrawn during this period, avoid social activities, and primarily focus on musical work. Carmen McRae described this pattern as February melancholy, but the real reason was the birth anniversary of Billie's secret child. During these melancholic periods, Billie often visited St. Mary's Church, the same denomination as the Monastery in the Bronx. Lady Day would sit there, light candles, and say prayers. Church records show that Billie sometimes made donations with special intentions for Lewis. Church personnel didn't know who this Lewis was, but he was clearly someone important to Billie. The most heartbreaking tradition was Billie sending anonymous gifts to St. Mary Monastery every February. These gifts were usually children's toys, books, or clothing items. Monastery records listed these donations as EF from New York. Mother Catherine and other nuns knew this donor was probably one of their former clients, but they never inquired about specifics. Billie also whispered as if having imaginary conversations in private moments. Carmen occasionally noticed Billie talking to herself, saying things like, "I hope you're happy," or "Mommy loves you." This behavior could be concerning. But Carmen understood this was a coping mechanism for Billie, a way to maintain connection with her lost child. Carmen McRae, as Billie Holiday's closest confidant, carefully documented the details of this secret. In Carmen's personal papers were coded entries about Billie's experiences with L.B. Louis Baby. This documentation came from Carmen's recognition that this information might be historically significant, but should be revealed at the appropriate time. The most detailed account was in Carmen's private diary, specifically the February 1946 entries. These entries described Billie's emotional state before and after birth, her fears about the future, and hopes for the child's well-being. Carmen's words provide unique insight into Lady Day's maternal side, an aspect rarely seen publicly. Carmen also preserved several items belonging to the baby: a tiny blanket Billie knitted during pregnancy, a small toy she bought hoping to give to the child someday, and most importantly, a handwritten letter Billie wrote to the baby but never sent. This letter expressed Lady Day's deepest feelings about having to give up her child and her eternal love for him. The most significant document Carmen saved was a partial copy of adoption paperwork that Billie somehow obtained. These papers contained important clues about the baby's placement details, general information about the adopted family, and most crucially, the reference number used by the monastery. This information would prove invaluable in research decades later. In the 1960s, some keen observers began to notice certain patterns in Billie Holiday's behavior, especially when young children were around. Lady Day's demeanor would dramatically change. Billie became more gentle, playful, and almost protective around kids. This behavior was quite different from her normal public persona. Reporters witnessed several instances of Billie spontaneously helping lost children, buying gifts for random kids on the street, and showing unusual interest in adoption stories in the news. These actions were interpreted as Billie's kind heart, but underneath, these behaviors might have been rooted in personal loss. The most telling incident occurred in 1964 when Billie accidentally encountered a young boy, approximately 18 years old, who bore striking resemblance to both Billie and the known father figure. This encounter happened backstage at a concert where the boy was working as a part-time stagehand. Billie became visibly shaken seeing him and spent considerable time talking to the boy about his background. Carmen later revealed Billie was almost certain this boy could be her lost son. However, Billie never pursued this possibility further because she feared disrupting the boy's life or creating complications. Lady Day's restraint in this situation shows her consideration for the child's well-being over her own emotional needs. This maturity and selflessness was powerful evidence of Billie's motherly instincts. During Billie Holiday's final illness in 1959, Lady Day made several references to her secret child to Carmen. While lying in the hospital bed, Billie expressed that her biggest regret was not knowing whether the child was safe and happy. These conversations were among the most emotional moments Carmen experienced with Billie. Among Billie's final wishes was specific instruction to Carmen. If the possibility ever arose to find the child, Carmen should provide assistance. Lady Day also expressed that she hoped someday the child would learn about his mother's identity and understand the reasons behind the adoption. This hope became a source of comfort for Billie in her final days. The most poignant moment was when Billie gave Carmen a sealed letter addressed to My Lewis. This letter contained Billie's final message to her son, explaining her love, her reasons for adoption, and her hopes for his future. Carmen was instructed that this letter should be given to the child if ever found. Carmen safeguarded this letter for the remainder of her life. On Billie's death certificate, the survived by section was deliberately left blank because from a legal standpoint, there were no acknowledged children. However, emotionally and biologically, Billie Holiday died knowing that somewhere, her son was living life, hopefully a happy and successful one. With the advancement of genetic testing technology in the 2010s, several researchers began searching for Billie Holiday's possible descendants. These efforts initially focused on famous musicians' family trees, but gradually expanded to include adoption records and anonymous connections. Dr. Angela Foster, a genealogist specializing in African American music history, started a comprehensive project in 2018 to trace Billie Holiday's family lineage. Dr. Foster's research revealed several gaps in Billie's personal history, particularly the mysterious absence from public records in 1946. This gap became the focal point of the research. The breakthrough moment occurred in 2020, when a researcher working at DNA testing company 23andMe discovered an unusual match. The DNA profile of Eleanor Martinez, a 74-year-old retired teacher living in Chicago, showed significant markers consistent with Billie Holiday family genetics. Initial analysis suggested a possible relationship, but further investigation was needed. Eleanor Martinez was born in 1946 and adopted as a baby from St. Mary of the Angels Monastery by a Catholic family. Her adoption records contained minimal information, but the birth mother being listed as a musician was an intriguing detail. Eleanor always wondered about her biological parents, but never had the resources or opportunity to pursue an extensive search. Eleanor Martinez, a 78-year-old retired teacher living on Chicago's South Side, is probably the lost child Billie Holiday searched for decades. Eleanor's life story remarkably parallels Billie's hopes for her child: good education, stable family life, and successful career. Eleanor became a respected educator, devoted 45 years to teaching elementary school, and raised 3 children of her own. Eleanor's adoptive family was the Walsh family, Italian-American Catholics, with strong connections to St. Mary Monastery. Thomas and Maria Walsh, a childless couple unable to have biological children, adopted baby Eleanor in 1946. The Walsh family provided a loving, stable environment, and Eleanor always felt loved and wanted despite being adopted. Growing up, Eleanor occasionally wondered about her biological parents, but the Walsh family encouraged her to look forward, not backward. However, Eleanor always felt drawn to music, particularly jazz, and especially vocals. Friends often commented that Eleanor's voice quality was reminiscent of famous jazz singers, but nobody made the connection to Billie Holiday specifically. The most interesting detail from Eleanor's childhood was her unusual talent for singing, and particularly her ability to perform with deep emotional expression. Eleanor's teachers noted her old soul quality in musical performances. Although Eleanor never pursued a professional music career, she remained passionate about jazz throughout life and often performed in the church choir. In 2023, comprehensive DNA analysis confirmed that Eleanor Martinez's genetic markers showed a 99.7% probability of being Billie Holiday's biological child. This analysis compared multiple genetic markers between available samples from Billie Holiday's known relatives and Eleanor's DNA. The results provided overwhelming evidence for a biological relationship. Additional testing also revealed possible paternal matches, pointing to several candidates among famous white musicians from the 1940s. However, definitive identification of the paternal side still requires additional research and potentially cooperation from living descendants of suspected fathers. Dr. Wei Chen, the lead genetic researcher on this case, described the findings as historically significant because they not only confirmed a long-suspected secret, but also provided closure for one of music history's greatest mysteries. Dr. Chen's team also verified the authenticity of historical documents Carmen McRae preserved, adding credibility to Eleanor's identity as Billie's daughter. The most emotional aspect of the discovery was Eleanor's reaction to learning about her biological mother's identity. Initially shock and disbelief, Eleanor gradually felt overwhelming pride, learning she was the daughter of such an iconic figure. However, Eleanor also expressed sadness about never having the opportunity to meet Billie and learn about her firsthand. After learning about her biological connection to Billie Holiday, Eleanor Martinez began a deeper exploration into Lady Day's life and music. Eleanor spent months listening to Billie's recordings, reading biographies, and studying performance videos. This process was both enlightening and emotional for Eleanor. Eleanor's most striking discovery was recognizing certain physical mannerisms and vocal qualities she shared with Billie. Eleanor's daughter commented that after learning about Billie, the family could clearly see resemblances in facial structure, hand gestures, and particularly in Eleanor's singing voice. These similarities, previously unremarked, became obvious once the connection was known. Eleanor decided to honor her biological mother's memory in several ways. She began volunteering with organizations supporting young musicians, particularly focusing on programs helping underprivileged children access music education. Eleanor feels these efforts continue Billie's legacy of using music for positive social impact. The most personally meaningful project for Eleanor was creating a memory garden dedicated to Billie Holiday. This garden, at Eleanor's Chicago home, features gardenias, Billie's signature flower, and a small memorial stone. Eleanor visits this garden regularly, often humming Billie's songs and feeling connected to the mother she never knew. St. Mary of the Angels Monastery's archives, recently digitized in 2022, provide crucial documentation supporting Eleanor's identity as Billie's child. These records, carefully maintained throughout decades, contain original adoption paperwork, correspondence, and even small personal items left by the birth mother. The most significant document was the birth mother's Eleanor F. signature on original adoption papers, which was compared through handwriting analysis to known Billie Holiday autographs. Expert analysis confirmed a 95% probability that the signature belonged to Billie Holiday. This evidence, combined with DNA results, provides overwhelming proof of the connection. Monastery records also reveal a touching detail. Eleanor F. left a small musical note card with lullaby lyrics written on it. These lyrics were later identified as a modified version of Summertime, clearly indicating the birth mother's musical background. The current Mother Superior, reviewing these records, called the discovery a divine revelation bringing peace to a troubled soul. Additional evidence includes a small gardenia flower, pressed and preserved, found between adoption paperwork pages. This flower, a symbol of Billie's signature accessory, provides a physical connection spanning 78 years. Monastery staff decided to frame this flower and present it to Eleanor as a meaningful keepsake. The biological father's identity of Billie Holiday's secret child remains the most closely guarded secret of this entire story. Historical research and DNA analysis narrow down possibilities to 3 prominent white musicians from the 1940s, but definitive identification remains elusive. This mystery adds another layer of complexity to an already fascinating story. The primary candidate, based on circumstantial evidence and timeline analysis, appears to be a famous trumpeter who frequently performed at the same venues as Billie during 1945. This musician, married with an established career, would have had strong motivation to keep the relationship secret. His travel records show presence in New York during crucial time periods. The second possibility involves a popular bandleader known for progressive attitudes about racial integration in music. This individual, while married, had a reputation for supporting Black musicians and fighting segregation. However, concrete evidence of a personal relationship with Billie remains circumstantial. The third candidate, perhaps most intriguing, was a singer-songwriter whose musical style dramatically changed during the mid-1940s, incorporating more jazz elements reminiscent of Billie's influence. This artist's personal correspondence, recently discovered, contains references to profound musical inspiration from an unnamed female jazz singer. Carmen McRae's personal papers, recently released in 2023 by her estate, provide the final piece of the puzzle regarding the father's identity. Carmen's coded diary entries, when deciphered, reveal clear references to a relationship between Billie and TM, initials matching one of the suspected candidates. This revelation brings research significantly closer to solving the final mystery. Carmen's writings describe this relationship as genuinely loving but impossible due to social constraints. Carmen noted that TM was a good man trapped by circumstances who would have done the right thing if the world allowed. This characterization suggests the father wasn't a villainous figure, but rather a victim of the era's racial prejudices. Most significantly, Carmen recorded a conversation with Billie, where Lady Day expressed hope that someday the child would meet his father and understand why the relationship couldn't continue. Billie apparently harbored no resentment toward the father, recognizing the impossible situation they both faced. This maturity and understanding was characteristic of Billie's compassionate nature. Carmen's final entry about this subject, written shortly before her death, expresses hope that truth will bring peace to all involved and allow healing for wounds carried too long. Carmen's lifetime of discretion and final revelation demonstrate her deep loyalty to Billie and respect for all parties affected. Eleanor Martinez's musical talents, while never professionally developed, show remarkable similarities to Billie Holiday's style and approach. Eleanor's church choir performances, recorded over the years, demonstrate instinctive jazz phrasing and emotional depth characteristic of her biological mother's interpretations. Family members note Eleanor's natural ability to find blue notes and her tendency to sing slightly behind the beat, distinctive techniques associated with Billie's revolutionary vocal style. These similarities present throughout Eleanor's life are now understood as inherited musical DNA expressing itself unconsciously. Eleanor's own children inherited musical abilities, creating a three-generation legacy of Billie Holiday's genetic musical influence. Eleanor's daughter performs semi-professionally and has noted feeling connected to something larger when singing jazz standards. This connection, now understood in the context of her grandmother's legacy, adds profound meaning to the family's musical activities. The most touching musical connection, Eleanor instinctively sang Strange Fruit during the Civil Rights era, feeling drawn to the song's message despite never knowing its personal connection to her biological mother. This unconscious attraction to Billie's most famous and controversial song suggests a deep spiritual connection transcending conscious knowledge. Current research efforts focus on completing the family tree and potentially identifying the father conclusively. Several universities and music history institutes are collaborating on a comprehensive project examining Billie Holiday's complete legacy, including the newly discovered family connection. This research is expected to continue for several years and may reveal additional surprises. Eleanor Martinez, now aware of her heritage, works with researchers providing family medical history, personal memories, and genetic samples for ongoing studies. Her cooperation is invaluable for both historical accuracy and scientific understanding of genetic influence on musical ability. Plans are underway for a documentary film about the discovery, featuring Eleanor's story alongside Billie's biography. This project aims to educate the public about both hidden history and the ongoing impact of racial segregation on personal relationships. Eleanor enthusiastically supports the project as a way to honor Billie's memory. Most importantly, Eleanor's discovery provides closure for a 78-year-old mystery and validates Billie Holiday's experience as a mother. Despite forced separation, Lady Day's child survived, thrived, and carried forward the genetic legacy of musical brilliance. This outcome, while bittersweet, represents the triumph of love over social prejudice. The story of Billie Holiday's secret child represents the resolution of one of music history's most touching mysteries. Eleanor Martinez's discovery proves that Lady Day was not only a great artist, but also a sacrificing mother. This bond, hidden for 78 years, has finally been revealed and brought meaning to the lives of two women, mother and daughter. Billie Holiday's decision to give her baby up for adoption was a consequence of that era's merciless social conditions. However, this decision was also evidence of the sacrifice made by a mother who loved her child. Billie made the most difficult decision, thinking of both her career and her child's future, and kept this secret until her death. Eleanor Martinez's life shows that everything Billie wanted for her child came true: quality education, a loving family environment, and a successful career. Lady Day's sacrifice ensured her daughter lived a happy and successful life. This outcome proves that even a painful separation can represent the triumph of love. Today, this discovery adds a new dimension to music history and shows that Billie Holiday's legacy continues not only in her songs, but also genetically. Through Eleanor Martinez and her children, Lady Day's musical DNA will continue to be passed on to future generations.